Right, good evening. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Children, Families and Education Select Committee. My name is Councillor Heena Makwana and I'm the chair of this committee. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts, and when you are invited to speak, please ensure you turn your microphones on so that you can be heard in the recording. For those watching via YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Okay, so before we go through our agenda, I'd like to introduce colleagues in the room. So to my right, I have Councillors Smallwood, Batt and Hagger. To my left, our Democratic Services Officer, Ryan Dell, and then Councillors Sweeting, Core, Gill, and our co-opted member, Mr. Tony Little. Officers presenting this evening are Kat Wyatt, Julie Kelly, Sandra Taylor, and Claire Fry. Welcome to you all this evening, and welcome to our committee coming back together again. So bar one change, it's nice to see you all back together again. So Ryan, apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Judge with Councillor Core substituting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Core, and welcome. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Do we have any? No, fantastic. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, which is the 18th of April. Can we agree those minutes? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting on the 11th of May, which was our AGM. Do we agree? Agreed, thank you very much. Agenda item 5, to confirm that the items of business marked as part 1 will be considered in public and the items marked as part 2 will be considered in private. So there are no part 2 items this evening. So straight on to agenda item 6, which is the Stronger Families Hub review. So just to explain that the purpose of this agenda item is to start considering our conclusions, findings and draft recommendations in relation to the review. I'll just give a quick recap. So to date, we have held 6 witness sessions. So the first witness session set the scene and outlined the work of the Stronger Families Hub. At the second and third, we heard from young people and their carers. The fourth session focused on hearing from the staff, and the fifth examined partnership working with our health representatives. And finally, our sixth session, which was held in 2 parts due to attendance, was to receive feedback from our educational representatives. So I just want to remind colleagues that if we discuss any findings from those sessions involving our young people, can we just be discreet and for safeguarding purposes not mention any names, please? Thank you. So potential recommendations, Ryan did send those round to everybody, so hopefully you've seen those recommendations. Councillor Sweeting, do you want to come in? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the 4 recommendations are generally very good. First of all, can I say that I think we need to thank all of the witnesses that attended all of the, 7 sessions, because they were all in their own way able to provide us with elements that we need to consider further in our recommendations. I mean, I was particularly glad that we did have representations from schools in both the north and the south of the borough. And I really would like to thank all of the witnesses through you, Chair, and maybe that, you could provide that sort of thank you, because without their input and the input of our officers as well, we would not be able to come up with the recommendations and a full report, and I think we will be able to come up with a very good and full list of recommendations. When it comes to the item on the extra items, I think we've got a lot that we could include. I know that I shared with you some time ago my thoughts on that, but I think what was very, very clear was that it was a service that was very much appreciated by schools, and that the officers working on it were very enthused by it all. But one thing did come across loud and clear, and I know it's going to be difficult to say this, but there was the fragility of capacity that was mentioned. In fact, the minutes of the meeting that we had before us mentioned several issues which relate to that, and I think we can't shy away from that. We want this service to be there for all of our residents, and early intervention is more cost-effective than later intervention. So I realise that there's a financial aspect to this, but I don't think we can shy away from it because so many of the witness sessions were saying that. I've got too many extra suggestions, and I know other colleagues around the table will have their own suggestions. So maybe even after this meeting, I can share that with you, Chair, and see whether your fellow councillors and officers consider any of them of merit. I think the report as well should have some information on the witness sessions and the evidence coming from the witness sessions. Apart from that, I think it's been a very good review, and I thank you for your input in that as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Agreed with your comments, especially with thanks to the witnesses who took their time out of their schedules to come and speak to us, especially the ones from schools, because we also know that schools are very busy places. So, and especially this time of year when term is ending, as teachers ourselves, we can appreciate this. Mr. Little.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo the comments that have been made about the helpfulness of the witnesses that we met and their enthusiasm for the model from those that I met at least. I think that in putting together our conclusions and recommendations, we ought to mention also the idea of the families telling their story once as being a feature that commends itself both to customers and to staff, I suspect, as being very helpful. And it ought to be brought out that this is an advantage of this model. I would also echo Councillor Sweeting's comments about what we heard on the fragility of the capacity, and given that from later reports this is going to be a model that we're extending across the borough, no doubt in some ways that may help alleviate the problem by giving capacity through the system. I suspect it's something that needs to be thought about systematically and planned for, rather than something that happens by happenstance. Another staff issue that I thought ought to be mentioned was some comments that came to us about a careers path not being as clear as it might be, and obviously that's a matter for the officers as executive. But again, I think it's worth highlighting as something that should be followed up. And a penultimate point from me, I think because this is something that's new coming across the country, there are probably opportunities from us to learn from best practice elsewhere and ideas that have worked elsewhere and we haven't yet thought of. I'm not saying anything negative about our staff in that, but it's something that in most businesses, most of the time, there is that capacity to learn. And I think, again, that it ought to be something that we formally draw attention to. And finally, a little moan from me. I didn't know anything about the meeting with the schools.
We do have a Hillingdon email address for you currently, which is what we've been using recently.
So a
personal
council email address?
Yes.
It would be nice if somebody had told me it existed. Perhaps you can advise me at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, we'll take that offline. Thank you. Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really happy to be part of this. And especially there's something that I very, very strongly feel about in all of this was, and the session that I attended was, because we are attempting a stronger families hub, and because we are attempting to engage, it says to engage with people, the wider engagement. So I think another thing that came across was that if it had been either advertised multilingually or in future going forward where so many services are going to be provided under one roof, if this I think I can't emphasize enough the need for it to be multilingual, for the need for it to reach the people it's meant to affect the most. So the diversity, I think it's really, really important. And then not only to reach just digitally, not only just to reach to them in English, but also to reach them through schools, through faith groups, through community groups, because the idea of it is to make it really work. And it would really work if we can actually reach the people it's meant to work for. So it will only happen if it's done in a way that there is a multilingual, multicultural approach to all of this. Then it benefits our people and all our residents in general. So I think that's one of my biggest recommendation would be going forward. If the community thinks that it's of merit to include that all that we do is in a way multilingual and approachable to all our residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just 2 points really. I just wondered if we could develop point 4 a little bit to include the private sector and private providers. I'm thinking about 98% of our nurseries in the borough, 2% is or was provided by the council. 98% is provided by private providers, and actually I think they have a role to play in that, along with the private sector, just in general. The other point was around, I think one of the things we got was getting especially young people who use the hub's feedback, and making sure that was time appropriate about when we went for it, not being I think it was in the middle of exams. I know it was to do with COVID, and it was a one-off, and there was a good reason for it. But just making sure that we get feedback from young people about their experience in the hub, and just sort of like a feedback plan, I think would be a good recommendation to have in there, just to really make sure that their voices are being heard. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to come in. There was one point for me that stood out from our last session with the educational representatives, and that was to do with consent, and especially around safeguarding. So there are some issues where it was felt that they couldn't progress necessarily because consent from the parents wasn't provided. However, I think we're aware that you don't necessarily need consent, because at the end of the day, the priority is the safety of that child or young person. So I think on the form, and please come in, Councillor Sweeting, because you were also with me on the meeting, on the form there's no option to actually explain whether consent was given or not. No, sorry, where the consent was given by the parents or not given, and then to explain why or why not. So I think something like that needs to be added into the form, just so there's clarity and everybody's then protected. So that was something I wanted to add there. Councillor Sutton, did you want to come in?
Just coming up with what Councillor Smallwood said about bringing as many areas in as possible. One of my scribbled recommendations here is further promotion of the hub through schools, community leaders, charities, the voluntary sector organisations, and councillors have a role here, and that was mentioned in one of the witness sessions, and out-borough schools, because some of our youngsters do go to out-borough schools, and there seems to be a gap there. So that was one of my suggestions, suggestion 5.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions or comments on this agenda item? No. Officers want to say anything at this point, maybe? Julie, do you want to come in? Thank you.
I don't disagree with many of the recommendations. I just think there's probably some that afterwards we need to clarify, particularly around consent and safeguarding, because there are clear thresholds around dispensing with parental consent that has to be addressed. But I totally take the point around we're very keen to record the consent. Recording, why not? Sounds like an absolutely great, practical, sensible thing that we can do, and do quite quickly. Point about young people's feedback. Feedback on the hub itself is probably not the best place to get it, because you'll know the young people you spoke to were ones who then, after a request going through the hub, have received a service. So we're ensuring that services, wherever they happen to be, whether it's a send pathway, a pathway into Catherine, services in youth justice or adolescent development or statutory social care, that there are feedback mechanisms in each one of those services, including the auditing. But no, I look forward to us having, again, a bit of dialogue once you've pulled them all together and seeing what we could do. Clearly it's something that we are proud of, and from Mr Little's point about learning from best practice, we're the first place in the country to have offered that residual 24-hour service, so people are modelling on our model rather than the other way around. But there are other things around service development, and we'll hear about sort of, you know, family hubs and other options as we move forward and develop it further that we can learn from other places. But thank you very much.
Councillor Cole.
I was also quite delighted that Hillingdon was in a way early bird with family hub thing, but this also meant that we went without the funding, the initial funding that they were giving everyone else up. So are we going to push for the next lot of funding soon as a council, asking for funding, because we missed out on that one, because we had already established the family hub system in place and the funding was probably to those who were setting up. So are we in the second round of it?
I'm going to hand over to officers if you want to answer that question. Although I think that, I don't know if it's necessarily this agenda item or the next, isn't it? So
it's the next agenda item,
yeah.
I would suggest. And we know there's a slight kind of disparity in terms of people's understanding about the Stronger Families Hub, which is the online portal, and family hubs, which are service delivery points. But I'm happy to clarify that as we move on.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Sweeting.
There was just one word on the recommendation 1 to renew the awareness of the Stronger Families Hub annually with partners. Now, I don't know about annually, because that sounds as if we're going to sort of, think about it in a whole year's time. But I think there almost needs to be a constant review, because it's such a new setup and system that we need to see that, not in a year's time, but in maybe 3 months' time or 6 months' time. And it almost needs to be a continual review. I'm sure that's what officers are doing anyway, but having the word annually seems to sort of mean we'll wait till the month comes up in 12 months' time before we actually put our thoughts together on where we're going with it. So I don't know whether we're able to revise that word.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, great. So we will bring this item to a close and move on to agenda item 7, which is the consultation on the Hillingdon 0 to 19 years core offer to children, young people and their families. So now I should hand over to Claire. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for inviting us to come this evening and talk to you through the consultation process that we're engaging with around the draft Family Hub strategy and options for the Council's early years nursery provision. I'd like to take you through briefly the report that I've provided, and then obviously I'm very happy to take questions and answer as best I can. So to provide an overview of family hubs as a concept in the national and local context, so family hubs is part of the government's commitment, looking to provide them in every region of England, and it's really looking to deliver a central access point where families can receive support, advice and information for relationship needs, for family needs, for health needs and other issues where they have children aged 0 to 19 but up to 25 for children with special educational needs and disabilities. It's very much supported by the DFE in terms of providing a wraparound framework for us to work towards. The National Centre for Family Hubs was launched last year, and that's being delivered by the Anna Freud Centre, and again that's providing support regionally in every part of the country to connect local authorities in delivering their Family Hub offer. And so alongside that also is the Best Start for Life report that was delivered by Dame Andrea Leadsom, and that very much looks at the support that we need to provide in the very earliest years, and so the first 1,001 days from conception through to a child's second birthday, so looking at that as being the most important and influential time in terms of thinking about long-term life chances, a point where we can make significant impact for children and their families, looking through support through maternity, health services, early education, etc., etc. So those pieces of literature all come together to help us think about what the framework for family hubs need to look like. There has been funding for 75 local authorities across the country, and the other 73 or so are yet to receive any funding at this point in time. So approximately half of the country have been funded. We're not currently aware of future funding options at the moment, so we're just kind of in the first rollout phase. So those local authorities that have been funded are very much working to DFE framework and timescales. Obviously in Hillingdon we've been fortunate enough to already have a family hub that's downstairs in the mezzanine level, and I know several of you have visited and seen the superb space that we have available to our children and young people and their families. And obviously we have the second family hub that's in development in Hayes as well, and that we hope will come online July-August time this year. So we'll have a second family hub already. So although very much we're thinking about the DFE framework and the three elements of access, connection and relationship that help us to think about how we deliver our services in an integrated manner, we're able to do it in a flexible way that means the timeframes that we work for Hillingdon as opposed to a DFE framework in that way. So in terms of what the service delivery offer aims to do, what we're looking to do is to ensure that we have good collaboration, connection and integration of services across council services, so from the very earliest years, so the Children's Centre core offer that we currently deliver, all the way through into youth services, adolescent development services, where necessary youth justice services. We're working with colleagues in children's services, so the Supervised Contact Centre is part of our family hub downstairs, so families coming for contact with their children are supported by their foster carers and contact workers to ensure that happens in a safe and positive environment. But we're also very much looking, as you've already talked about with the previous item, about how we connect with the local community. How are we working with the voluntary sector? How are we working with partners in health, community groups, faith groups, our schools? So the ethos very much is about creating a network of support and services around a family hub. So yes, there's the physical geographical building that may take a variety of different shapes and sizes where service delivery will happen. But in addition, there are community and delivery points that we're proposing, some of those in our existing children's centre establishments, some of them potentially in community venues, connections with libraries as well from the education and learning point of view. So very much looking at how as a council we use our assets well, but also how we connect with other community spaces as well. And we're very much mindful that certain parts of the borough it's harder to find community spaces, so we're looking at how we do that in a much more sort of mobile way, so working with the mobile library, working with the transporter bus and staff going out and accessing communities where they are rather than expecting them to have to come to us. We have an overarching principle that we're trying to achieve, if that's agreed through the consultation process, of ensuring that there are delivery points within 30 minutes walk or a mile and a half from a resident's home, and we very much looked at how we've mapped that around the borough, and that's influenced the delivery points and the hubs that we're proposing in order to try and get best coverage across the borough. But as I say, those are for consultation. We're receiving resident feedback and we'll work through that in order to then provide recommendations as an outcome of what residents have said to us about the proposals that we're providing. So that's kind of an overarching view of what family hubs are trying to achieve. I think what I would say very, very clearly is although potentially from a delivery point perspective, some of that means that we would cease delivering services from some spaces and look to re-provide it from others. This is not about a reduction in service offer. It's very much about how we continue to deliver the service, how we actually grow the service so that we're covering the whole of the age range all the way up to 19, 25 for children and young people with SEND, and very much by doing that in partnership with other services. So again, it's not all about the council having to directly deliver everything. We're looking to avoid duplication, but very much how we are working in communities, with communities, to understand what their needs are and how we best then provide services in response to that. So that would provide us with a core offer of services that we would see being delivered across the whole of the borough based on family support, health needs, access to education, etc., etc., and then a flexible offer which actually would be much more specialist and targeted support, some of which will be linked to specific identified needs maybe of children and young people themselves, so children that have SEND, but also about community needs as well. So what is the community struggling with, challenged by, what are the access challenges that they experience, so we can very much kind of tailor the support that we have to the needs of local community groups. So kind of that's the overview in terms of family hubs. From a consultation point of view, the consultation started on the 10th of May. It's for 12 weeks. It will run until the 30th of July. As was agreed by Cabinet, we've brought in additional resource to support us with delivering the consultation. So the Family Hub Network, which is a charity, are supporting the delivery of the consultation. And as I've said in the report, when I wrote it, we were partway through. So we've done a number of engagement events in children's centres, some in libraries. We have an online survey. We've also been out working and meeting the community at different events around the borough that were already in existence. We have a number of other events that kind of are planned, another range of consultation events in children's centres for the second half of the consultation, and some further events in libraries that are just being firmed up that we'll be able to publicise as well. So we're looking to get out to as many spaces and places as possible that residents are in order to be able to raise their awareness of the Family Hub offer that we're proposing through the draft strategy, and to ask for their feedback so we can consider that in terms of what comes next in terms of the consultation outcomes. Very mindful that we're also looking at consulting on the early years nurseries as well. So we have the 3 early years nurseries within the council that we deliver directly ourselves. And we are asking residents for their feedback as to options for the nurseries going forward. As you'll be aware from previous papers, the nurseries run at a significant deficit to the council, and so we're looking to see what options are available to us to consider how that provision may be delivered going forwards. We've proposed a few options within the original draft cabinet paper, and those are contained within the consultation, but also very much wanting to hear from residents if they have alternative ideas or thoughts about how we could deliver the service going forward. So we're exploring a variety of different options to think about that provision whilst maintaining our childcare sufficiency duty as a council that we have to deliver. I'll pause there because I know I can talk a lot.
That's great. Thank you, Claire. And also thank you for having us come along to the Uxbridge Family Hub. So it was really nice to see all the services on offer and the activity that was going on actually when we were actually there visiting. So thank you for that. Okay. I see members indicating. So Councillor Batt, I'll come to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Claire, for that report. Given that we're sort of the guinea pig for sort of the role model for stronger family hubs, I'm just wondering if currently the remit's, of course, child safeguarding. I'm just wondering if you foresee the remit being a lot more wider. There's other sort of family issues such as mental health or domestic violence, and I'm just wondering if we have the ability to kind of explore those kind of areas as well as just child safeguarding issues.
Thank you for the question. So absolutely does the Family Hub and the children's centres that work alongside it at the moment receive referrals through the Stronger Families Hub. So the targeted work that we do sometimes comes through direct requests from families that we're working with in groups and sessions, but absolutely we receive referrals through the Stronger Families Hub to provide direct support, and sometimes that takes the shape of one-to-one support and advice for a family to see them through a challenge using the Stronger Families plan, but sometimes that also comes in the shape of prioritising their access to groups and activities that we know will actually help to meet that particular or discrete need. And so as we continue to work very closely with colleagues in children's services and with youth services across the borough, then there's opportunity for a greater range of support services to be provided and linked in through the Family Hub networks. But certainly using the Stronger Families Hub as an avenue for that support to be triaged and directed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hagar.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great report, and it's really good to see as well, because obviously I'm new on this, so straight in and looking at what we've developed over the last year is incredible. So congratulations to everyone. I think it's always the way that as we start inputting services in, and lots of services in one area, it's very difficult for people to actually understand what services are being provided, and it gets a little bit complex and complicated. I just wondered how we were going to manage that. Whether there's any chance that we can have more of a digital online, like an app, or something like that, because again we're referring from a multi-agency approach, aren't we, from different areas, from what I'm understanding, because I am new on this, so I don't know. But I think, you know, as we go forward, a lot of people are, especially the younger generation and families, are quite more computer illiterate, I would have thought. I think communication is the biggest issue, I believe, because I think we delivering the products, like you said here. I think it's just a communication out there to the families, and especially the prevention. So I think the other question I wanted to know was, with the multitask, and when we're multi-linking and we're on the prevention, and again, I might have missed that because I'm new on, but does that mean that we're also supporting, say, pregnancies with alcoholism, things like that, where we know that obviously, you know, the babies that are going to be delivered might actually go into care? Yeah, I don't know. So sorry to be a bit vague there. But
Thank you, Councillor. So to pick up your first question around online and digital access, there are a number of apps. One actually that's used in pregnancy, so the Mum and Baby app that's delivered by Central North West London, the wider London North West Healthcare Trust, looking at maternity services. So that it's a local app that talks about maternity support, but also then has access to local offers. So the children's centres are embedded in that app, and women are encouraged when they register with their midwife and have their first appointment to download the app, because it gives them a whole range of information about pregnancy, becoming a first-time parent possibly, but also some of the local support services. So some of that exists already, not delivered by us, but delivered by maternity services. But so there is some of that already happens. The other expectation as part of the Family Hub work is that we would publish on our Start for Life offer, which very much looks at what we are doing and providing from a service point of view for children and families pre-birth through to age 2. And so that needs to be both in paper literature of some form as well as an online offer. We're not quite at that stage yet. We have the information that we're collating. We need to look at what that looks like and how it's best accessible. I'm not an expert on apps, but I'm sure it's something we could certainly look at the possibilities of, and whether there was funding available for us to deliver a more progressive digital offer is something we could certainly consider. And certainly the Send local offer online also provides online access to a range of information around support services to cover off the 0 to 25 Send support that we're also need to provide. So we're doing some of it, but I absolutely agree that there's room for us to develop and deliver more of the online information access and support as we progress on our journey. In terms of the second question around pregnancy support, so we work very closely with midwifery services. They currently deliver antenatal and postnatal clinics across the large majority of our children's centres. They're actively delivering services downstairs in the Family Hub. There's a specialist midwifery team that delivers support for women where there is concern around their perhaps mental health related to pregnancy, or where there are concerns around support for children post-birth. And also we very closely link in with the social care teams. So again, sometimes we receive requests for support to help a parent prepare for birth and parenthood, because that's an experience that they haven't yet had and they need more support around that. Again, I think there's more we can do to link in with that, and I think as we grow the offer, we have greater opportunity to develop it further.
Great, thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you very much for the full report. It's very interesting. I think we can all be very happy with the way of travel that the hubs will be providing services close to where people live and close to where there's a need. However, are we? I'm looking at page 13 and I'm thinking venues, data, population need, finance, and I'm remembering the 1.5 miles and 30 minutes. Now, there are certain areas that seem to be well provided for with venues, but other areas seem to be almost non-existent venues. I mean, I'm particularly thinking of my neck of the woods, Heathrow Villages, and West Drayton seems to be reasonably well provided, but there's really nothing for Heathrow Villages. And I'm sure that it's going to be more than 1.5 miles and 30 minutes with all of that population, which is quite disparate. So I am concerned about the venue, and it would have been useful, I think, to have had a map, and maybe that will happen in future with venues and satellite venues, if you like, and overlay that with population, because it's very clear, if you look at an earlier page in the report, where the higher levels of population are, page 4, with the number of families and the priority groups. It was a pity, by the way, that the priority groups weren't identified to areas of the borough rather than joined together, because it doesn't really give, statistical information. But coming back to the list, why not local primaries maybe that have got unfilled places? We know that some of our primaries have in fact got spare capacity. Why aren't the libraries in certain parts of the borough not used more fully? I mean, I know there's the issue of whether Useley Library is going to be where it is or in another place, and I know West Drayton Library is pretty small, but they are location. Unfortunately, Heathrow Villages has got nothing, and I think this is really going to be difficult for that area to be properly addressed.
Claire, a chance to come back, please. Thank you. Oh, Sandra, thank you.
Thank you. I think your points are very valid about the Heathrow Villages and the south of the borough, and the way in which we're disseminating services to meet need. So for Heathrow Villages, we're acutely aware. Part of my role is managing the public health service, and the work that we're targeting in that area is vitally important for a generational change for these children and families. So really valid points. I think we've got an overview here of asking people for their feedback about where they feel services are in need, and that's what we need to be collecting through the consultation. We want to reach into communities, and buildings are part of the story. The biggest part of the story actually is the in-reach into those communities, and COVID as a pandemic really taught us a lot about how, one, we collect data about those priority groups, and two, how we reach into communities and do work where the work is needed. So your point is really valid. We need to address the lack of services in Heathrow Villages that actually are based there. So we need to use some of the local buildings, etc., to put people into, not as a hub, not as a building that's static, because we want to make best use, as Claire said, of our council assets, but actually as touch points for people to be able to meet with us, talking about the transport, talking about mobile offers. We're working with CNWL also on mobile offers into Heathrow Villages. We've had many talks about things like pharmacy and GP missing from those areas. So we're acutely aware of that, and it's something we very much will feed into this consultation. So thank you for your point. Could I just add that, because I've made a note, so while I've got the mic I'll say it, hubs are a bit of an issue in terms of everything's a hub at the moment, and it is, so from government we've got family hubs, we've got stronger family hubs, we've got health hubs, we've got neighbourhood hubs, so everything is a hub, and I think as officers we've got a bit of a duty to try and find a way of making it a bit clearer. We've got targeted and universal, we've got statutory and non-statutory, and we just need to make it clearer for you as our councillors and members, and for the public to understand the journey that where they can use services. So hearing it today is really useful, because we can take that on board and think that through a bit more clearly.
Thank you, Sandra. That's really helpful. Thank you. Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand that these key data sets, they're still based on the old ward boundaries. So when are we expecting it to align the data with the new ward boundaries? And another thing which came across during my conversation with people was, when you say 1.5 miles or 30 minutes, what provisions will be available for the parents who are disabled, And one parent just said, have they considered walking half an hour with a toddler? So your responses to that, please. Thank you, Chair.
So in relation to the data, I understand you're talking about the childcare sufficiency report. Part of the way in which we develop the childcare sufficiency report using the Mayor of London's format uses information from the Department for Education that looks at parents who are looking or interested in going back to work or training for education or employment. And unfortunately that data is currently still in the old ward format. So in order for us to actually manage the sufficiency calculations when the report was written in December, because it's an annual report, it's still in that old format. I am very hopeful that it will change across the course of this current year, and we'll be able to update it to reflect the new ward boundaries. But to some extent we're dependent upon the other data sets that we draw upon to create the sufficiency assessment. But I absolutely understand that presents a challenge now in terms of how we now operate as a council, but we'll do our best to to translate that to make sense in terms of the new ward boundaries.
Okay, Mr. Little.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points. One is, as a former ward councillor for Heathrow Villages, I'd like to extend Councillor Sweeting's point that the area, I think, is beyond the boundary of Heathrow Villages. What I would consider South Cranford is even further away from any facilities of any sort other than Heathrow Airport. There are, however, in Hillingdon Village, plenty of premises that could be hired for an event and used for consultation, in addition to the schools and the schools in that other ward to the east. So I think there are practical solutions if you're willing to be innovative and experimental with them, because I think the idea of it being confined to the mobile library is probably not going to be something that will achieve what you would like to achieve. And my second point relates to the consultation process, and to advocate that perhaps that there ought to be a special effort to consult with the clergy, both, if I may use the term in this way, not just the Christian faiths, but the other faith groups, their leaders, that they're people that families turn to when they have problems. They will be well informed about the sorts of problems that come up in their area, but they won't be necessarily rushing to fill in questionnaires for the council unless the council goes out to them and actually grabs them by the scruff of the neck and say, can you give us some of your precious time to look at this or help us with this? So a bit of advocacy for me on that side.
And that's really, really welcome. Thank you very much. And we'll certainly take the points on board and look to see how we can incorporate them in the remaining time that we have for consultation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hagar?
Yes, thank you. I did look at the consultation and filled it out for my family. And I just wondered whether there's any way that we can help you guys, all of us here, to actually get that consultation out and reaching more people, because it is about all of us together doing our bit. And I'm wondering whether we can reach businesses. And the reason why I say businesses, because most people now have to work full time and have got kids at home. And obviously it's in the employer's interest that their employees at work and not at home with maybe issues, family. So I didn't know. So 2 questions really. 1, how can we help by spreading that consultation? And 2, can we get into businesses as well? I know it's always a difficult area to get employees to complete as well, especially the local ones in the borough.
So we would love your support to spread the word and to advocate for residents to complete the consultation. We're using a range of social media opportunities for those that are digitally aware in order to promote the consultation. So if you're using Twitter, Facebook, please do follow the council and retweet and engage and let different community groups that you know and are engaged with know about the consultation. Similarly, if there are events happening in your local community areas that you would like us to come and present at, talk to residents, really happy to receive that feedback and do what we can. As I say, we have a range of things that we've already arranged, but very happy to receive suggestions or ideas or invitations, absolutely, to come and engage with residents in a whole range of different formats. So very happy to receive that. From a business point of view, it's something I would need to take away and think about, if that was okay. I think we are keen to hear from our residents, and I'm very conscious that across businesses in the local area, we have a whole range of people working, not just Hillingdon residents, but others as well. So it's something I would need to think into deeper, if that was okay.
Thank you. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Claire, for the insightful report and the consultation. My question was regarding the early year centres. I know the consultation report says there's 3 options. One is to increase costs, one is to close down, and the third one is to go into the private sector. I was just wondering, were any of the following considerations taken into account? So I know in 2 of the 3 areas, capacity has already gone down with childcare, so it's due to cost, so that could be a slight issue there. The other one I was thinking about was there's a big increase in SEND and SEN needs in the borough, and a lot of those early year centres had expertise within those fields, so that could have been useful to take that load on. And then and the third one, I think it was increase in house building in the area. So I know Uxbridge and Hayes have had loads of new houses, flats built in the areas, so there's a need for that demand for the early year centres. So my question was, in a nutshell, have those factors been taken into account for the consultation?
So in terms of the consultation, we're really asking residents to tell us. So part of what the consultation questions ask, does ask residents if they use childcare, if they do, what they value most about childcare, what are the things that they're looking for from a childcare provider, so we can understand that better in terms of meeting our sufficiency duty, but also why residents use childcare. So is it because they're working, is it because they're looking for educational opportunities for their children, etc., etc. So we're trying to build up a much better picture from residents about their need and desire for childcare and how we can meet that need. In terms of looking at our sufficiency, yes, to some extent we've looked at local areas and developments from a housing point of view. Sometimes that's quite difficult to judge in terms of who will actually choose to move into an area and whether that will be for families who will have young children or whether they will be looking to move elsewhere. So, but we certainly looked at that to some extent. I think the suggestions that we make in the consultation are by no means exhaustive. We're really keen to hear other ideas and avenues that we could explore. So I think a number of those things have been thought about prior to consultation in the work that we've done already. The consultation will help us to hear from residents and partners about what the options might be going forward, and all of those things will then be taken into consideration when we review the consultation responses and work that through before we come back to Cabinet.
Yeah, go on.
I know in the budget, I think it was the previous budget, the Chancellor announced the new childcare allowances and measures. Has that played a part in this consultation as well?
Not to date. We'd launched the consultation and then the announcement came about the new childcare offer. We are receiving information from the Department for Education in piecemeal, so we know what the ground plan is. We know that, for example, there will be an increase in the funding to providers from September. We know we'll receive what that will be by the end of the academic term. We have yet to receive it. So the challenge that we have at this moment in time is knowing what our duty will be, but not necessarily knowing the parameters within which we'll have to operate. But absolutely, that will play a part in our considerations post-consultation as we pull together the findings and think about the next steps that we might need to take, because that's a duty that we now know is coming that we were not aware of at the point at which we launched the consultation. So we'll absolutely take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand, Claire, because you said that because there is still time, the consultation is still on. Is there a possibility of then designing the questionnaire in different languages? Because the online one, it's just in English. So if we were to reach out to spaces, say, in Punjabi or Somali or Hindi or Gujarati or something, was there still time to do that? So, for example, there are events coming up in, say, near Guru Nanak School, or events in mosque or something. Would we have something available to reach out to the communities? Do you have multilingual staff, or can we tailor the questionnaires, or can we just translate the questionnaires into the languages, and then we can reach out those communities? Thank you.
So it's certainly something we can take away and look at. What I can tell you we've done already is that within the Children's Centre staff team, we have a number of staff who are multilingual, and they've certainly been part of consultation events and working with families in groups for whom English is not their first language, so supporting them to have an understanding of what the consultation event is about, and to explain some of the thoughts and processes that we've gone through. I fully appreciate that that's a drop in the ocean compared to the community that we're seeking to reach and support, but we are trying. Similarly, we've also been working where families are digitally enabled, then we've been using other options that support us to be able to translate the questionnaire into other languages in order to be able to respond and then receive responses in that way. But again, I know that that doesn't reach everybody, so it's certainly something we can take away and see what we can do to see how we can get that supported.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
I come back to finance, as I seem to be doing quite a lot today. What has the council allocated? Have they allocated any additional funds for this initiative? Because we are closing quite a few of our children's centres. I think the audit is 6 in the south and 1 in the north. So will that mean that some of those staff will be involved in the hubs? So where are we with the funding generally? Is it up or down or the same or what?
So to pick up on the point about staffing, as I've said earlier, we're relocating services rather than reducing services. So staff already contractually work across a locality, across the whole borough. They don't have a specific designated centre that they are a member of staff of. They work collectively in localities, but again, when there are staffing challenges, people happily move across the borough and support collectively. So there isn't a staff consultation. We're not looking to reduce staffing or change staffing. We're looking to relocate services if the consultation, if the strategy is approved, in order to just deliver services in a different way in different spaces. So from a staff point of view, there's no change in that respect. From a financial point of view, some of the spaces that we're proposing we cease delivering from. We have lease arrangements on with schools, and so therefore we're responsible for the day-to-day maintenance and operational costs. But similarly, if we drop off a space in one place, we'll be delivering from a different space, so consequently we will need the financial resource in order to be able to deliver services in a different place.
But I just have a follow-up question which is related to finance, and that is a lot of the families and the youngsters that are going to be accommodated and helped and supported are either asylum-seeking children or asylum-seeking families. Now, we all know about the Home Office having very tight pockets. Are we trying to get funding from the Home Office on all of the work that your staff and the Hillingdon is doing to support these youngsters and their families? Because I know in particular areas of the borough, and we had that from the witness session on Monday, some schools have got very large numbers, and some of those families are requiring the support of the hubs. So it would seem only right, in my mind, that the Home Office and the big pocket that they may need to be opened will be opened. I don't know whether the council is investigating that.
I think I'll take that one. There is, I think you will be aware, there is small pockets of money for certain groups of families that are seeking asylum, particularly around the Afghan and Ukraine for the rest of our families who are located in contingency hotel accommodation, temporary accommodation, mainly in the south of the borough, mainly near Heathrow, because that is where our hotels are. There has been no additional funding. How we've responded to those families as a council is their children in need in our area and have access to the range of services that any other child does. And we continue to engage in dialogue with the Home Office. Our next conversation as myself and our Director for Corporate Resources will take place on Monday. I can't second guess what the outcome of that is, but we are advocating for the increased needs of the children in the area and pressures in certain places and ensuring that those needs are met. We're also engaging across with our public health colleagues in health and other areas to ensure that those children are as safeguarded, well cared for and provided for as any other child in the borough. But it is a challenge and there has been no additional financial resource at this time, but we are fully engaged in conversation with the Home Office and that's something that I'm strongly advocating for.
Could I just say good luck?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Okay, Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. More an observation about how important I think it is. It's almost in relation to policing as well. We talk about community policing. This is almost like a community way of delivering this service, and I warmly welcome it being taken out into the community. You know, buildings cannot grow legs and they cannot walk into communities and do things. And often we get we are so excited about buildings, right, as if they're like this magic thing that's going to solve all the problems. Someone has to go to a building, right, to go and get the problem solved. I'm somebody, and certainly believing, that we should be taking that out to the communities, and I warmly welcome the work that's being done by officers to sort of think about this in a more innovative way. And I think this is certainly a move in the right direction, and warmly welcome the consultation and hope that people respond to it in the positive way that it will, and the positive impacts it will have if it is delivered in this sort of modern way that we need to deliver services.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm as well. Right, I think on that note we'll bring this agenda item to a close. Thank you. So Claire and Sandra, you're welcome to stay on for the next agenda item as well. Equally, you're free to, up to you how you want to do it. Lovely, that's great. So I think on the agenda item 7 we also need to submit comments to Cabinet, so we will delegate that to Ryan in conjunction with myself and Councillor Sweeting to agree the comments. Yes, Councillor Sweeting.
Yes, I've already put together some points on that which I will share with you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, which is the youth offer consultation. So is that you, Kat? Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. In January 2023, I provided this Select Committee with an update on the current provision of youth services and shared an overview of the proposed youth offer strategy. It was agreed that I would return to seek the feedback of the Select Committee on the proposed youth offer strategy as part of the consultation. In March 2023, Cabinet agreed a public consultation which subsequently commenced on the 3rd of April and ran until the 5th of June. The consultation consisted of an online survey and a number of consultation groups held with young people. The consultation included a dedicated consultation page, 11 different posts on social media. It was shared with school forums and distributed via school emails. It was circulated to community groups, was promoted in the April Hillingdon People Extra and appeared in the May-June edition of Hillingdon People. The consultation ended on the 5th of June and therefore full analysis is still to be completed. However, I have extracted some of the headlines to share with the committee today. With regards to the online consultation, we received 123 responses. 90 of those were from Hillingdon residents, and the rest included young people who attended school within Hillingdon, some from businesses and our voluntary groups. The majority of residents were aged between 10 to 15 years. 14% of those respondents indicated they had a special educational need, which is higher than the local data of around 10% of the population. The highest levels of responses were from the HA4 postcode, with the fewest number of responses from Harefield, Northwood and Northwood Hills. 57% of the respondents on the online consultation were not engaged in any youth service programme at that time, and 51% said they had never attended a programme. Respondents indicated they would like to see more activities that included promotion around emotional health and wellbeing support, sports and outdoor leisure activities. Respondents reacted positively to the youth offer to be delivered in a range of settings, with 58% saying they were more likely to attend if this was to be built in. 80% of respondents spoke positively regarding access to youth programmes online through the digital offer. 51% of respondents felt that the new offer promoted inclusivity, with an additional 36% stating it partially promoted inclusivity. With regards to the consultation groups, we had 14 facilitated consultation groups. That included 154 children who are currently engaged with a form of youth provision across the borough. 64% of those engaged were aged between 10 to 15 years, and around 50% lived in the south of the borough. 31% wanted locality-based services, with 27% saying they wanted to see an increase of outdoor activities. Young people in the consultation group said that they were happy to travel across the borough to visit the right centre or right activities in the right place to meet their needs. I open the floor up to questions.
Thank you so much for that. Questions? Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kat, for the report. I really welcome this very important consultation, because it's going to give us a great opportunity to redefine and reinvigorate our youth services. And I say this at a time when we've had a very damning recent independent report on sports such as cricket, which has shown sort of the inaccessibility of more elite sports simply because they're so expensive. And I've always envisaged that we create a sort of a dynamic hub for learning, collaboration, arts, music, cultural activities. But what I think we need to do is, I think our youth services should be run almost like a students' union kind of body, where young people are responsible for running it, because that will teach them leadership skills and various other skills, where they can set up a committee of their own, and of course be supervised by doing it, and work hand in hand with the council on key decision making and funding allocation. I think working also with voluntary organisations and businesses can also support them with future job creation. I think those are quite good considerations, maybe that ought to be taken into account. The second point I have is that I appreciate that a lot of the youth want more digital-based services, but we also need to look at their best interests. And while I see the benefits of this, I would also encourage less digitisation. If you look at question 12 on page 33, and I think you also pointed this out, 170 children said that they want to get out of their house. So I think outside activities are also really, really important, and we have really great outdoor facilities available which we can utilise and facilitate better. And my pledge is that we want younger people to really stay away from their laptops and phones and the home environment as much as possible. So I guess the question there is how we balance, what's the balancing act and how we do that.
Thank you, Councillor Batt. I think the data you referred to was old, so it was the 2021 survey, but you're correct in that 80% of children from the young people from the recent online survey said that they wanted a form of digital offer. And I think what this tells us is actually that children and young people are telling us they want a breadth of offer. And actually what we found, particularly on the back of COVID, is that absolutely we want to get children out, we want to get them outdoors, we want to get them engaging and socialising, etc. But for some children and young people, they're just not at that point. And actually we've seen through our emotional mental health and wellbeing services that by providing that reach into children and young people's homes through the digital offer, that has then given them the confidence to come and engage in activities, in whether it's in centres or outdoor activities, leisure activities, etc. So I think absolutely right, it's about getting that balance right, but actually at the moment there isn't that offer, and it's about being able to provide that breadth of offer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweeting, sorry.
Hesitation. It's interesting the second consultation really was only responded to by 124. Is there a reason for this? Is there a reason that we're not really getting to get people to respond? I'm interested in a couple of the questions on the second consultation. Question 9, if you do not use youth centres, what are the reasons? Because we didn't ask that in the first consultation. We knew that people weren't using youth centres, but maybe you can provide me with information on what the youngsters were saying about youth centres. And secondly, I'll talk about venues again, and the lack of some venues in certain areas of the borough. And it's the same, it's similar areas to I was talking about before, that are not well covered. And I'd also ask about clarity. I think what young people were missing last time was, if you went to the council's website and asked what certain youth centres activities were being on offer, quite a few of them were closed, and my own one in West Drayton was still there on the council's website when it had been demolished. So we really do need to have clarity of what is on offer for our youngsters. But it would be interesting to know the response to question 9 of the new consultation.
Yep. So thank you, Councillor Sweeting. So in terms of why are young people not using it at the moment, one is about accessibility to those youth centres. They also said in terms of what was on offer, didn't meet their needs. And I think it loops back to your final point, Councillor Sweeting, about that visibility of the offer. And actually that was quite apparent in both the consultations, that what our young people were telling us is they want to know where to go to one place where they can see what is on offer, whether that is through a youth offer, whether that's a sports and leisure programme. And actually that's something there's some traction already taking place behind that. And I think it was touched on earlier in Claire's section regarding an app. And actually we're already there with that. There are a number of apps which exist. There's one called the Local Village Network which exists, but there are others as well. So we're looking to think about how can we work with our partners and our community organisations to actually get that information on an app. We all know that's what young people use. So they can go on, they can put their postcode in and they can see what's available within their locality. So we're already working behind the scenes with regards to that.
Can I come back to the number of youngsters accessing the service? It seems from the report that you've talked about 154 accessing some of the activities. Now we have got a huge young population, we know that, because they are all appearing in our secondary schools, and we know the pressure that our secondaries have got. You know, how many do we really want to have the support of the council in respect of the activities that our young people really do need? I know quite a lot of our young people in certain parts of the borough, but really all over, go to the uniformed organisations, but others that maybe they're harder to reach are not. So is there a sort of a target percentage of the young people that Hillingdon would like to be supporting in any youth activity? Because at the moment it seems that our numbers are pretty small.
And I don't think I can disagree with you. I think the 154 were the 154 children that we engaged through the particular consultation groups, and you're right in that they are young people who are already accessing a particular service or programme. So actually it's about how do we engage those children and young people who aren't accessing those services. And that's very much about, we need to go and find those children and young people. We need to engage with them, we need to listen to them, they need to understand what services they want, and then support them to access those services. And that very much links in with the model that we're talking about in terms of that outreach and detached work as well, because actually we need to go into our communities and actually build that trust and those relationships with some of those communities to then support them to access those services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand that, as you all mentioned, that data is such minuscule. How robust do you think would be the result of it, that it informs the future pathway for it? And another thing I wanted to also understand was, because we've mentioned about the disconnect that we can actually see, where do you think this disconnect or information gap is happening? Because I was surprised to find out that there were hundreds of people who are not aware of the Duke of Edinburgh. They didn't know Youth Council, they didn't know NCS, they didn't know Youth Parliament. I mean, they didn't know about it. So where is this connect, do you think, is stemming from? And besides the apps that you think that are you're trying to build up. What other ways do you think we can bridge this knowledge gap? Because you're offering so much, and then still there are not people taking it up because they're not even aware that they exist. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the robust data, if we compare the data that we've received compared to the 2021 data, we have seen an increase in terms of the response from our children and young people, and that's why we facilitated the consultation groups as well. So actually, we removed the barrier in terms of an online form and actually went out and spoke to our children and young people. But it's not just that data set that we've considering our youth offer strategy against. We've got lots of data in terms of our adolescent development services, other services as well that are delivering directly to our children and young people. And we've got the longevity of that data where children and young people are telling us, particularly after COVID, the way they want things to change and how we should be delivering services to them. So it's not just about what you're seeing in front of you, but actually what's helped shape and inform the youth offer strategy is that other data as well. In terms of your point around the disconnect, I think the journey up to now has been very much that we haven't had the visibility of the offer. It hasn't been there. So our children and young people didn't know what was on offer. And actually in terms of the staffing resources within that service, that hasn't necessarily been there up to date, so it's about reinvigorating that. But as part of the youth offer, it is about that visibility, it's about that accessibility. We need to go out and find children and young people where they are. We need to build those relationships, and we need to support them into whatever those particular programs are. So that we need to work on that disconnect, absolutely, and that's what we're motivated to do by delivering a really contextually and culturally informed service that is different in different localities across the borough.
Thank you. Mr. Little.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say I admire the ambition that seems to be expressed in this consultation document, that it's got breadth, that it is attempting to reach out into the community. But I think there's a whole range of things that possibly need further clarification in your own minds and perhaps in the minds of your potential customers, clients, whatever you'd like to call them. If you implemented this strategy, I'm not sure that I would understand whether it had succeeded or not. I'm not sure what the criteria are of that success and what the purpose, the clarity of purpose, that is a way that you can translate that into something concrete. And if the Chair will allow me, I will elaborate on that. Every Saturday morning I go out across the road from me, Hillingdon House Farm. Every Saturday morning there's probably 100 or 150 kids out there playing organised voluntary football groups, both genders. There are separate groups that meet on other days, and I suspect if I went round the borough, there are lots and lots and lots of different sporting groups avidly followed by our young people. And similarly, if there's a clarity of purpose, you know, if there's an amateur theatre group, well, I'm sure it'll attract a certain kind of kid. And you can go on through all the cultural activities, all the sporting activities, give or take the expense associated with them. But then there are a whole range of children who are disadvantaged every which way. They're disadvantaged by their location, they're disadvantaged by their family circumstances, they're disadvantaged by mental health issues or by physical health issues, and so on and so forth. Children who are in danger of going off the rails, and you're providing specialist services to them. And all of this is kind of covered in quite a short document here that gives you kind of too many targets at one go. to try and improve upon. And I think you perhaps need to step back and turn it into more bite-sized chunks of what you're intending to achieve to be successful. Now, that may be just me not seeing what you're seeing, but if so, I'd be really grateful if you could tell me.
I absolutely hear what you're saying, and probably because we've done so many papers on this that the one paper doesn't cover it all. We've been working on this piece of transformation for over a year since the services transferred back into children's. For those children that are specifically disadvantaged, that have targeted needs, we've already went through that process over the last few years. So our Access programme and outreach and early intervention delivers fantastic outcomes for children. If the committee wants to see some of that at some point in the future, some of the evidence and data, we'll be happy to bring that. And that's particularly for children at risk of criminal and sexual exploitation, that may be missing from home, involved in serious youth violence, so very much targeted to that group of young people. We also have a range of targeted programmes which CAT services have already delivered over a number of years that were transformed. And I want to say about 2019, but anything pre-COVID, it seems like a very long time, to cover, sexual health, emotional health, substance misuse, self-esteem, a range of programmes. But what we've had, and what this is hoping to address, is we have our more universal offer, which in my view is still prevention and early intervention at early stage. We're sat separately and delivered in a different way. And we feel that we have a blueprint for delivering good services to children that do the preventative work, that do all the things we want to. And we will need to attach an outcomes framework to that and measure success. And some of that is soft. It's about increased confidence, self-esteem, involvement in other activities, diversion at times. But to bring that in line, because I don't think it really matters to children whether they're universal targeted or whatever. That's how it helps us, manage our services and work it out. What we're really hoping to bring what was our universal youth offer into that larger umbrella, overseen by the one service area, is that children get services to meet their needs where they need them. And this bit has just been sat on the side and not brought in line yet. So this is the ambition to do that, but I think we've got a strong blueprint, so we've done a lot of the hard work with some other services before. But ultimately, the universal bit is having positive activities, and it might be that you like the arts and crafts bit, or it might be the football, and some of it will be not directly council delivered, and that's where the directory work comes in, because those organised football sessions, for example, you know about it, I don't know about it, maybe in your community they know about it, but somebody moving in today. So there's lots of parts to it, but I am hopefully, once we get through the consultation, and we will hopefully have an offer that we can build, because the offer will be bigger, we'll have greater access and more mobility. We will start to see much better outcomes, and we'll see less children over time from Claire's world, from the not to the hopefully, if we're looking 10 years down the line, need more of the universal than the targeted, because early interventions work. I hope that makes sense, but that's how we pitch this. So it might seem like we're trying to do too much at once, but it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle that I feel we haven't quite cracked yet. Might change in 2 or 3 years' time, because we don't know. Needs change, demographics change, children's life experience change, but very much keen to move on and start tracking the improvement if we can.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hager.
Thank you. I mean, I think we do really well with our youth, actually, and I think we've done really well in the past with our youth. Great to hear about the apps. I think as well, I mean, I don't know, but I know that the summer youth projects are sold out completely, aren't they? You know, when we have the summer youth over the 6 weeks, right? I know I couldn't get my daughter on one of them because it was like completely sold out. I think that's what we do really well, and I don't know whether that's something we can look at to bring in, because we know it works really well. and whether that's the type of thing that obviously the youth want, because it's sold out, right? So they can't get on it. Whether that's something we can bring into the day-to-day sector of youth and what we're providing as it is. So that was one question. I didn't know whether we could. And we obviously have a cohort of youth that have signed into those summer programmes. So that's an area that maybe we can go back into to see who we've got. And the other thing was, I think as with everything, I know it's really difficult with consultations, there's a legal side to it and all that goes with it. But I'm just mindful that most people won't fill out anything unless there's a reward at the end, especially with the children. And it's true, isn't it? So like, whatever. There always has to be a golden nugget at the end of filling out anything when it comes to surveys or consultations. And I think we would probably have got a bigger cohort if we could have put something at the end of that. I'm not saying a holiday in Barbados, but it's sort of that golden nugget really for people to actually want to be a part of. I don't know, but there we go.
Our summer programme is continuing, but it has been augmented with the sort of year-round half programme as well for more disadvantaged children. And our targeted services will also continue. So if parents haven't booked a space on a summer programme, it doesn't mean that children who would still benefit from those targeted services, that it stops. I take your point about the motivation. We were kind of hoping that a better improved youth service and more things to do might have been the motivation to do it. But yeah, it's always difficult. We know that return rates, which is why we have to try and use intelligence of the young people that we do work with on a day-to-day basis, and what people in the community are saying, and what councillors are saying here. So this is part of, although that online consultation's closed down, the feedback that we get tonight will also feed into what eventually is produced for Cabinet in September.
Great, thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hagger mentioned Golden Nuggets. One of my favourite films is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I want to talk about the Golden Ticket. And I think the Golden Ticket in this report is point 14, the Comprehensive Directive of Opportunities for our young people. Because there is plenty of opportunities out there for young people. And actually, there's also plenty of money in organisations who are willing to give it away to make sure that disadvantaged children who may come from backgrounds that may not be able to afford to do some of those things to do it, right? I'm involved with Ruislip Roundtable. I'm involved with the Ruislip Combined Charity. I wouldn't say we struggle to give money away, but sometimes we have to go poking around and asking people, right? Do you want it? And those kind of opportunities are there. And I just wanted to really push that I think point 14 and having this one-stop shop that we can go to that tells you where the football club is, that tells you where the cricket club is, the brownies, the guides, the hill walk in the Arts and Crafts Society. That is something, because then we can send it to schools, right? I mean, go to schools. Here is something you can give to young people where we'll tell you where everything is. And actually, amazingly, the council doesn't have to do it all. Unbelievably, there are other people out there that are providing these amazing services that aren't based in the sort of archaic idea that's based around youth centres and buildings, although they have their places. There is lots of other things going wrong, and if we can have that one-stop shop. So I'd really encourage that is something that is pushed hard and supported, and we see, because it's incredibly important to me, and I certainly know important to my residents.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 28 and 29, there are a couple of things that I wanted to understand. It says, based on the analysis of footfall in the youth centres, 3 centres are not situated in the places that are accessible to young residents. I'm just wondering if this accessibility was part of the questionnaire that went out, these centres, or could it have been affected because, as many youngsters said, they did not even know that something like that existed. Could that have affected the footfall? So if that was the case, then do you think it would be prudent to close the youth centres? And another thing that I wanted to because I was looking at the delivery spaces, I was wondering why there was no secondary school signed up, because it says most of it is primary schools, and most of them, especially if you come to Charwell or West Rayton or Hayes, or I was wondering why no secondary schools have signed up. As there are, yeah, no, in the south of the borough mainly. Was there a hiccup, or what's happening with the secondary schools on this end? Thank you.
I suppose the first word of caution is this is not an exhaustive list. This is places where we're already delivering, where we know we can deliver, and where we're trying to overlap with that bigger 0 to 19. So there is absolutely opportunities to go and speak to our secondary schools and or whatever space. I know I was down in the Skills Hub, and one of Cat's staff went down there because they have a nice new building and they've got new facilities, and they have young people that attend that would benefit for some additional extracurricular support. So that is still, it will never be a done deal. The point about the youth centres is absolutely an interesting point. I suppose I can't give you a definitive answer, but I do know that when I'm trying to think, it was at least a couple of years ago, probably went round with our mobile and detached team. So I went to see all our youth centres, and we were delivering things and what we were doing. And a lot of that came from intelligence for from the children who they were meeting on the street and saying, why aren't, you know, when things are open, why aren't you going here? Well, it's not where we want it. So that intelligence has come from there. So it's not about, I suppose it's back to, it's the same bit of the jigsaw. It's not about shutting, closing, reducing services. This is about building the services. But I think we probably have to be realistic in the days of, and I did think it was a good time, a good idea at one point, so I will admit that before I'm not criticising anybody, is that we think that standalone buildings that are only used a few times a week were a good idea. And I remember not just in Hillingdon and other places across the country, that was the way we went. Now we understand a bit more, I think, that actually multifunctional spaces where families can be serviced, not just young people, but we also know that we do need at times places that are just young people, because they don't want their parents there, or they don't want their wee brothers and sisters there as well. So it's about trying to get that balance for us and doing that exercise about accessibility. The whole point around Heathrow villages and other areas of this borough that aren't accessible for family hubs is absolutely the same issue for our youth offer. We already have the transporter bus, which we've been able to deploy. Part of our proposal, because it is just a proposal, nothing's been agreed, and it has to go to Cabinet in September, would be to increase that mobile facility as well. But again, not to just have a mobile youth bus, because hopefully, all things well, kids are going to be in school in the day. So more having a community resource. So those sorts of things that we trialled, because we had to during COVID, support me vaccine programmes, getting health services into communities that don't have something so there, looking at those options as well. So nothing's ever off the table, but that was some of the reason why. If that makes sense.
Okay, Councillor Sweeting.
It's funding again. Funding for youth services generally throughout the country has been reduced very, very significantly. So is this youth offer sort of financially neutral, or will there be any additional funds to sort of deliver this?
The youth offer itself, in terms of the staffing and the capability, is not going to cost us anything extra. It will cost us a bit more than we're spending just now, because we know that there's vacancy gaps and we want this agreed and we want to increase the staffing, but in terms of base budget it won't make a difference. There will need to be some investment, I think that's understood, in terms of the mobile bus, the setting up of the directory and getting that information. So there will be an initial increased investment to enable us to get up and running and do those things. But we are still looking at opportunities with partners, with health colleagues, because if we have a facility that's used by not just the council, then we need to think about how that's funded. But there has been no real-time cut at all in our funding for youth services.
I think the second transporter bus has been trundling for quite a long time, so it will be interesting if it actually meets a destination and it is agreed by Cabinet, so I very much hope it will be.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow on from what Julie said in terms of, I think as well, Councillor Sweeting, that if we have a strong youth offer in place, that then enables us to explore opportunities for additional grant funding, both through organisations such as the Youth Endowment Fund, but also local organisations as well, which Councillor Smallwood referred to. I think because we don't have that firm framework and foundation at the moment, it's very difficult to make any applications. But actually, if we have that framework there, then certainly there's lots of opportunities to look for external funding and grants.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you. Yeah, just on that point, I said external funding. I just think a little bit of joined up thinking. The world is our oyster, trust me. I work with several of those groups and know exactly that they've got money to not throw away but give away and help people. I guess my point just is around in future questioning on these questionnaires is could we be a little less, as Julia said, building based and a little more about is there a provision near me? Because I think if you spoke to young people around is there a provision near them, if it's the football team or the scout group, you'd probably get a lot more positive answer than did you go down to Ruislip Young People's Centre, right? Great place, love it, in my ward. But they're two different things, and actually what we're talking about here is access to services and provisions for young people, not did they go into a building. And I just think that's really important that we make sure that is led in any of our future surveying, if possible, please. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any more questions or comments? Fantastic. Okay, we can bring this item to a close. Thank you so much for your time, for joining us this evening and for answering all of our questions comprehensively and providing all that excellent insight as well. You're welcome to stay on or you're welcome to leave. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So again, on this agenda item, we do need to submit comments to Cabinet. So I'll delegate to Ryan in conjunction with myself and Councillor Sweeting to agree the comments for Cabinet. Okay, fantastic. So we move on now to agenda item 9, which is the minutes of the corporate parenting panel on the 24th of May. Do we agree the minutes? Yeah? Thank you very much. Agenda item 10, corporate parenting panel membership 2023 to 24. So we need to just agree the recommendations, which is to appoint Councillors Dennis, myself and Councillor Sweeting to be the permanent elected members on the panel, to appoint Councillors Hager and Smallwood as the named substitutes, and to appoint Councillor Dennis as the chair and myself as the vice chair. Oh, Councillor Gill?
And just, I'd like to be a substitute in case Councillor Sweeting can't make it.
Okay, all right. Do we? Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. Do we agree? Yeah. Thank you very much. And moving on to agenda item 11, which is the forward plan. The only thing I guess to note there is in September, the Cabinet meeting that's coming up. That's got two of our key items on there. Did Councillor Sweeting, did you? Yeah,
I don't quite know where the SEND strategy is coming back. On this list it says expected June 2023. Well, obviously that's slipped. I think it's slipped to September, has it not? But are we going to see any of this before it goes to Cabinet? I think it's a question I asked before.
If I may, I'll go away and come back on that, if I may.
Okay, great. And then agenda item 12 is...
Sorry. Also, the Cabinet meeting of September the 14th, it said Children's Centres delivery model and early years nurseries. Not certain that we've had any information on the Children's Centre delivery model. I mean, obviously we have on the early years nurseries, but maybe I've missed the Children's Centre delivery because if it's going to the September meeting of Cabinet, it's not come to us first, has it, for our comments?
If I may, I'll go away and follow up on that as well, if I may.
Okay, great. So that's moving on to agenda item 12, which is the work programme. Mr. Little.
You don't often hear from me on this one, but we don't appear to be making a choice of another review subject. Should we be?
I think not just yet, because I think we need to finish our review first, and then we will look into kind of discussing some options for the next one.
But shouldn't that be scheduled in? I mean, we are pretty well at the end of the previous process, give or take your negotiations with Councillor Sweeting.
Yeah, maybe we can start to think about it and perhaps look at it, but I would like to finalise our recommendations, I think. But there's no harm in us kind of having some ideas and thoughts about it for sure and preparing. So when we do come to that time, at least we've got something to start off with, perhaps.
Because otherwise we're liable to lose most of the council's year before we get started.
Yes, understood. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Sweeting.
We did discuss about having audits of send children by school and asylum-seeking children by school. I'm happy for it to be a part 2 because obviously it's a sensitive issue, but I do think there's a link between certain, I'll say problems. Let's have the word problems with certain schools having a significant number of both send children and asylum-seeking children, and sometimes some schools have got both. So I do think that we just need to look at this to see whether it is an issue for some of our schools. And also, we did have on the possible plan, school organisation plan, which was on the April meeting. Now I know we used to deliver a school organisation plan when many moons ago, and that was all to do with planning of various activities in schools as well as school places, but it seems to have dropped off. And also, we used to have a July budget report. It's now slipped to September, which is fine because it gives officers a little more time, but I don't know whether there's any reason why it's now slipping to September.
If I can take all the things away, I can follow up with those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Chair, can I just make a suggestion on these final 2 points? That
yes.
It might be helpful, I think, for everybody on committee, and especially helpful for Ryan, who's doing a fantastic job for us, to maybe submit some of these in advance, just so Ryan can be sort of pre-prepared. You know, he's not sort of like he's not Mystic Meg or the Magic Man, but I think we see these agendas quite far in advance, especially the work programme and the forward plan. So I think we could probably do some of that in advance. Out of the agenda items, probably not, because sometimes points come, but I think maybe that would be helpful. It's a mistake I've made as well, so it's not pointed or
Councillor Smallwood, thank you very much. I agree, that's a good idea, and certainly something that we should all be mindful of, perhaps, if we've got ideas or suggestions or things that we just want clarification on. If we submit that to Ryan in advance, then that's helpful, yeah.
Coming back to those 2 issues, it has been discussed and it has been included in the minutes. So it's not something that's sort of popped up this evening.
No, that's correct. Yes, it has been, and I think Ryan is aware, but I think it'd be helpful to just take it offline as well, just as a reminder point that he can come back with some information in the meeting. Okay, great. So I thank you all for your contributions in the discussions today. I think that we all did really well, so thank you, and we'll bring this meeting to a close.